A 9-year-old girl walks home from a school baseball game in a quiet city in northern Japan. She doesn't make it. The police search. They search for weeks, then months. Theories multiply. One that's taken seriously is that North Korean agents may have taken her. This is the early 90s. Abductions by foreign agents were known to happen along that coast. The search turns up nothing. The years pass. Japan moves on. 9 years and 2 months later, on a cold January night in the year 2000, she walks up to two police officers and tells them her name. She is 19 years old. She can barely stand. Her muscles have wasted away from years without movement. And despite being 19, she speaks and behaves like a child, because developmentally, that's exactly where time stopped for her. The room where she spent nearly a decade was 200 meters from a police station. This is the Niigata Girl Confinement Incident. November 13, 1990, Sanjo City, Niigata Prefecture, a mid-sized industrial city about 200 kilometers north of Tokyo. Fusako Sano was 9 years old and in the 4th grade. She had spent part of the afternoon watching a baseball game at her school. Then she started walking home. She never arrived. A large search was launched immediately. Police, neighbors, and volunteers spread out across the area. When nothing turned up in the first days and weeks, investigators began entertaining broader theories about what might have happened. Given Niigata's location on the Sea of Japan coast, and the fact that North Korea was known to have been abducting Japanese citizens along that stretch of coastline in prior years, the possibility of a foreign agent kidnapping was treated as a genuine lead. Police resources followed that direction. They did not look at the man who had taken her. His name was Nobuyuki Sato. He was 28 years old, unemployed, and lived with his elderly mother in the city of Kashiwazaki, about 55 kilometers from Sanjo, along the same coastline. On November 13, 1990, he forced Fusako into his car and drove her to that house. He placed her in the room on the 2nd floor. She would not leave it for 9 years and 2 months. On the evening of January 28, 2000, a staff member from the Kashiwazaki Public Health Center arrived at the Sato residence on a welfare matter related to Nobuyuki's erratic behavior. He caused a scene. Police were called, and Fusako Sano, now 19, walked toward the officers and identified herself. The physical state she was in told the story of where she had been. Her weight had dropped from approximately 46 kilograms to 38, about 83 pounds. The muscles in her hands and feet had atrophied so severely that she struggled to walk on her own. Her skin was pale and showed signs of jaundice from years without sunlight. And despite her age, her behavior and manner of speaking had stalled at the developmental level of the child she was when she was taken. 9 years of isolation had done that to her. To understand how a girl could spend nearly a decade in a room 200 meters from a police koban, a local police substation, you have to trace back the chain of failures that made it possible. And that chain starts before Fusako Sano was even born. On June 13, 1989, a year and a half before he abducted Fusako, Nobuyuki Sato was arrested for committing violence against another girl. She was 9 years old. He was convicted on September 19, 1989, and received a sentence of 1 year's imprisonment, suspended for 3 years, which meant he walked free. And because of this conviction, his name and record should have remained in the Niigata prefectural police system as a known offender targeting young children. Somehow, it didn't. His name disappeared from the criminal suspect registry. The exact administrative mechanism behind this failure was never fully and publicly explained, but the result was clear. When Fusako Sano vanished in November 1990, police running checks on local known offenders did not encounter Sato's name. He was never brought in, never questioned. Meanwhile, in the room upstairs, Fusako's confinement was taking shape. In the early months, she was kept tied up. Sato used a stun gun to enforce compliance. She is said to have been subjected to electric shocks if she didn't follow instructions, which included recording horse racing programs on the television. She was not permitted to use the bathroom. She was given plastic bags. She did not go outside. Over the years, the physical damage compounded steadily. She received limited food. Accounts from different sources vary on exactly how much, with some suggesting 1 meal per day was used to deliberately suppress her physical development, while others describe simple but more regular meals. Whatever the regime, the result was extreme undernutrition and physical deterioration. Her muscles atrophied. She saw no sunlight. Her body, deprived of exercise and light, began to fail quietly in that room. There was a moment, in January 1996, 6 years into her captivity, when the outside world almost found her. Sato's mother, then 73 years old, contacted the Kashiwazaki Public Health Center. Her son, she said, had been acting strangely. He had been violent toward her. She was frightened. The center took note of the call. Nothing more happened. Fusako remained upstairs. Then, in the winter of 2000, Public Health Center staff made a welfare visit to the Sato home regarding Nobuyuki's continued erratic behavior. He became agitated and caused a disturbance. Police arrived, and Fusako walked toward them and said who she was. Sato was taken to a hospital as mentally unstable that same evening. He was formally arrested on February 11, 2000. How does a case like this survive for 9 years without anyone connecting the dots? The answer is a chain, each link a failure on its own, but together they formed a cage around Fusako as surely as the room's walls did. The first link is Sato himself. He was born on July 15, 1962, in Kashiwazaki, the city where he would later keep Fusako confined. He was the only child of parents who were considerably older when he arrived. His father was 63, his mother 38. It's said that his parents granted him essentially everything he wanted, that household life organized itself around him. When his father was institutionalized due to old age in the late 1980s, Sato reportedly did not attend the funeral. He was unemployed and had no visible social life. The 1989 crime targeting a 9-year-old girl was not, in retrospect, an aberration. It was a signal. The second link is the administrative failure. A man with a documented conviction for violence against a young girl should have appeared in any search of local offenders when a young girl vanished nearby. He didn't. Whether this was a clerical error, a record system failure, or something else has never been definitively established. But the effect was total. Sato was invisible to the investigation. The third link is institutional inaction. In 1996, Sato's own mother, an elderly woman afraid of her own son, told the public health authorities that something was wrong. She described violent behavior. She asked for help. The authorities heard a troubled family situation and moved on. They did not ask what he was doing in that house. They did not look upstairs, and the fourth link, perhaps the most quietly devastating, is simple geography and routine. The house was 200 meters from a police koban. Officers passed within sight of that street for 9 years. A missing child's name existed on a list somewhere. Those two facts should have collided. The system's architecture meant they never did. When you try to understand what 9 years in a single room does to a person, you have to think about what development actually requires. Childhood and adolescence are not passive. They happen because of interaction. With peers, with the world, with challenge and change and movement. Fusako Sano was 9 years old when all of that stopped. When she was discovered at 19, reports described her as presenting with the cognitive and emotional development of the child she had been at the moment of abduction. That is not poetic language. It is a documented consequence of profound, extended deprivation. She had no adolescence. She had no relationships. She had no new experiences to build a self around. The woman she should have become simply had no material to form from. There's a well-documented psychological phenomenon sometimes described in long-term captivity cases, where a person who initially attempts to resist or escape gradually loses the sense that escape is even possible. At first, it said, Fusako did want to leave, but Sato's combination of physical restraints, threats, and punishment, the stun gun used as a tool of behavioral control, the total isolation from the outside world, made resistance feel increasingly futile. That is not a character flaw. It is what sustained coercive control does. Over time, it doesn't just restrict your body. It reshapes what you understand your options to be. As for Sato, the fact that his 1989 crime also targeted a 9-year-old girl is significant. Whatever drove him was not random. The suspended sentence he received returned him to the community without any real intervention. He had crossed a serious line, found that the consequences were limited, and was then left without monitoring or treatment. A year and a half later, he crossed a far worse one. Whether that trajectory was shaped primarily by his upbringing, by mental illness, by the absence of accountability, or by something else is not something I can answer. And this is not a clinical diagnosis, but the pattern is clear. A man who targeted a specific type of victim was not adequately held accountable and escalated. What the case also reveals is how systems fail at the human level. Sato's mother tried to raise an alarm in 1996. She was elderly, she was afraid, and she went to the right place. The system heard a worried old woman describing her troubled son. It did not take the next step. It did not ask, "What is he doing in that house? Who else is there? Who has access to that upstairs room?" Sometimes the question that would save everything is the one nobody thinks to ask because nobody has been told to ask it. The courts moved slowly but eventually rendered judgment. On January 22, 2002, the Niigata District Court sentenced Nobuyuki Sato to 14 years imprisonment, 1 year short of the maximum applicable. The Tokyo High Court reduced that to 11 years on appeal in October 2002, but in July 2003, the Supreme Court overturned the High Court's reduction and restored the original 14-year sentence. He served it. His mother, who had developed dementia after his incarceration, was hospitalized in a care facility and died while he was still in prison. In the immediate aftermath of Fusako's discovery, the case detonated inside Japan's police establishment. It emerged that Niigata Prefectural Police Chief Koji Kobayashi had not gone to the station when she was found. He had been playing mahjong with the head of the regional police bureaus. His attempts to manage the story afterward were seen as dishonest. He resigned on February 26, 2000. The head of the regional police bureaus resigned 3 days later. The case became a defining reference point in Japanese discussions about police accountability, records management, and what happens when bureaucratic systems quietly absorb their own failures. Fusako Sano's identity has been protected. Japanese law and media convention shield victims of crimes of this nature, and we know very little about her life after 2000. What we can say is that recovery from 9 years of total isolation is not a milestone. It is a process measured in years, probably decades, if it can be completed at all. She lost her entire childhood and adolescence. The adults and institutions around her, some through a single catastrophic administrative error, some through inaction when they had been clearly alerted, did not protect her. What stays with you about this case is the detail of the Koban, 200 meters. For 9 years, officers arrived for shifts and went home from shifts on a street that led to that house. For 9 years, a missing 9-year-old existed on a list somewhere in the same prefecture. Those two facts should have touched each other at some point. The system was built in a way that meant they didn't. That gap, between what is known and what is asked, is where cases like this survive. A missing child, a convicted man nearby whose record had been lost, an elderly mother who asked for help. 3 points that were never connected. Closing that gap isn't just a question of policy or record systems. It's a question of whether the people inside institutions are trained and encouraged to ask the next question. Because sometimes the next question is the only thing standing between a routine visit and someone walking into the light after 9 years. Thanks for watching. If this case has stayed with you, subscribe and keep watching, because understanding how these silences are built is where the work of preventing them has to start.